McMahon. I am an alcoholic. I have a sobriety date of November 28th, 2014. I have the extreme honor of introducing our speaker for the night. Somebody who's so amazing that when she calls and asks if you'll introduce her, that you wonder if she has a phone number. I met Anna about a year ago. I was doing business development for a treatment center, and honestly, I was hoping to get in this business. But after spending quite a bit of time with her, I started to see something in her that I really wanted. I had been out of the rooms of AA for a couple of years, and I didn't realize exactly how miserable I was until I was around somebody who was as bright and shining as Anna is. So one day I sent her a text and I said, "Are you taking sponsees? And if you are, would you consider being my sponsor?" Yes, I'm a very low maintenance sponsee. So she said, "I'm not taking sponsees at the moment, but let me pray about it." So a couple days go by and I hadn't heard from her. I'm like, well, she's forgotten about me. It's going to be awkward when I see her. But she did respond and she said, "Here are my expectations. Doot, 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 doot. P.S. I'm a high maintenance sponsor." And while she has been, and she has had those expectations, she has been so with grace and understanding and gentle nudges, and not once has ever made me feel inadequate, which a lot of us do come into the rooms feeling that way. Being around Anna, I have seen what it is like to live recovery out loud. The good, the beautiful, the messy, all of it. And most importantly, I have learned AA's code, love and tolerance for all, and especially for ourselves. Anna.
Super nice, thank you. Is the mic okay? Yeah, okay. Wow, hi. My name's Anna, I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is July 3rd, 2006. I just celebrated 17 years, which is a miracle. I told my story a lot. I'm a little more nervous tonight because I know there's a family component here. There's more Normies in the room. But I think that's great. We don't all pick the houses we're born in, and some of us got some houses that weren't so great. I'm assuming if you have family members out here right now on a Saturday night, you got a good house. So thank you for everyone that's out here to support. It's a big deal. So that being said, to get over the nervousness, what I do before I start talking is I visualize that I'm going to say something and then everyone's going to run screaming out of the room and go relapse immediately. So stay in your chairs. I also want to say that I am absolutely a huge fan of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a very, very proud member of Alcoholics Anonymous. It has truly changed my life for the better. It is not the only way to get sober. I don't know how popular that is to say in a treatment center, but there's multiple paths to sobriety. The 12 steps is what has worked for me. It's what continues to work for me. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about quite a bit, is the 12-step stuff. The other thing I want to say is that almost nothing up here is original. I was taught it, heard it, witnessed it. And so everything I am is a culmination of 164 pages of basic text, pretty much. Someone told me once that if you hear something in a meeting that you like, you can share it and you have to credit that person 3 times. And then after the 3rd time, you can claim it as your own. So, that's pretty good. So a lot of what I'm saying is not original at all. So my family, I grew up in Texas. Mother was a huge Southern belle, so I was raised, get that look off your face. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. My mother would never go get the mail without putting on lipstick because you never know who you're going to run into. She passed away before my addiction really, really took off. I think she would have found alcoholism impolite and tacky. It would have happened anyway, but she definitely would not have handled it too terribly well. So pretty good family of origin. Yeah, my parents were both teachers, and so education was really, really stressed. I had reading book lists from the age of about 3. Television was kind of a weird thing in my house. My parents firmly believed that if you watch television, you're not using your brain. So I got to watch 3 hours of television a week. I had to submit my list by Sunday night of what I wanted to watch for the previous week. Sunday nights, I'm usually out running around playing, so I didn't get the list in most of the time. So I didn't watch a lot of TV growing up. It's also hard when you have to write out why you want to watch Love Boat and Fantasy Island back to back. Why you want to. So TV is just kind of nothing that I really picked up. I've more than made up for it now, I can assure you of that. So that completely backfired. But it was, and I guess also when I was in college, there's some cultural references that I missed because I've never seen a lot of TV shows at all. So that was kind of an odd thing. I was in a gifted and talented program, which meant that I went to school with the same like 14 people my entire life. Still friends with some of them today. Actually, we have a book club. But I started college when I was very young, did kind of a half-day college, half-day high school kind of thing. And so when I got to college, I was intellectually able to comprehend the material. I was emotionally, 16. So college was a whirlwind of party. And yeah, that's where everything really took off. So I think I was probably a full-blown alcoholic by the time I was 17 years old. And I definitely tried pretty much every drug that there is, and some drugs quite a bit. Alcohol was my great baby, and that was the one that I loved the most. But I qualify for a lot of other things as well. So I was in college looking like I was trying everything under the sun, and my father called me into his office one day and said, "Hey, I don't know what's going on, but you need to stop whatever it is." And I was so relieved at that point that someone was able to see me and acknowledge what a train wreck I was, that I started to tell him everything that was going on. And his response was, "Don't tell me, because if you tell me, I'm going to have to tell mom, and I don't want to do that. So you figure out what's going on and what you need to do to fix it, and then you do that." So I moved to San Francisco. Moved to San Francisco, and within 24 hours had found a drug dealer and some pool bars. So nothing really changed there at all. I was 19 and a half, 20 years old. So everything just kind of continued out there. My mother was diagnosed with cancer about that same time, and I moved pretty quickly back to Texas to take care of her. My father's a lovely man, not so great with the day-to-days. And so I was 19 and a half, 20-year-old person. I became the primary caretaker for my mother. Moved back home, the chemo, the radiation, the pills. She wanted to die at home, and so we did everything we could to make that happen. But she ended up passing away in a hospital. So, but that was a lot. That was a lot for someone my age who's still drinking a whole lot. I did the total delusion of the alcoholic mind. So my mom gets diagnosed with cancer. I'm doing alcohol and all sorts of other substances. And I remember telling all my friends, my mother is going through cancer treatment, and so I can no longer do cocaine. It just wouldn't be right. And I really meant it. Like, this is a big thing. I'm being all respectful. I'm still drinking. I'm still dipping in her pain medication quite regularly, but I'm going to cut out some of the hard drugs out of, respect for my mother and what she's going through. So just to give you the idea of the total delusion there. My mother handled cancer and her passing with ultimate grace. I've never seen someone handle it as beautifully, and I'm super, super happy for it, because years later, when I was my father's primary caretaker, when he was dealing with cancer, it gave me a lot of tools to handle that. And he was not as gracious as she was at all. So it was really nice to have that early on experience. She was incredibly bright, and she would say things like, "Well, 1 in 4 people get cancer, and so I'm having the cancer so the other 3 people in this family don't have to," which is completely illogical, but very, very sweet, right? So that's kind of what it looked like for a couple of years dealing with her. And, the day she passed was so lovely. She and I were up, my dad was in the room, he was asleep. And she said, "Anna, there's a time when it's really important to fight." right? And there's a time when the most graceful thing to do is to get up. And so I'm going to pass away now, and can you get a pen and paper, because I'd like to dictate my obituary, which she did, and then she died. Just, you know, class to the very, very end, which is pretty remarkable. My dad was a father of the Depression and a real, you know, suck it up and just kind of deal with life kind of person. And so I sucked it up, right? And kept drinking and moved to Austin and got a job and was just kind of there and still being a train wreck. When I suggested a year later that I thought it'd be good to go to therapy, his response is, no, stupid people go to therapy, but whatever. So sucks to be you, Dad, because I'm a therapist now. So, but I did go to therapy, and I did get some help around that, but it was really a struggle. The other thing too, I was really, you know, my dad didn't handle this well either. We're a very tight-knit, close family. And so I was writing him letters once a week after my mom passed away. And it was so fascinating after my dad died, because I got all those letters and I read them, and you could see the progression of my alcoholism in these letters. Like every letter, I'm hungover, I'm drunk, I'm going here, this concert, this party, this boyfriend, this thing, this financial mess. And, you know, my dad never said anything about it. And I think it was because he just didn't, probably out of fear or just some attachment issues, like couldn't say anything. So, you know, again, to all you family members that are here, that's amazing, and say it, right? I think we tend to kind of tiptoe around our addicts and alcoholics. They can take it, right? Trust me, they're living an addict lifestyle. They are smart and resourceful and are doing the deal. They can handle anything. So I think, you know, part of, I think, the biggest struggle for addicts and alcoholics is we can't connect to ourselves and we don't feel seen, right? So see them. Even if it's to say, I see you and I don't like you. I love you, but I do not like you. I do not like your behavior. Those are okay things to say. And I think sometimes we shy around that. So I'm sure you guys will talk about that in your groups tomorrow. So drinking. I really don't want to spend a lot of time on the war story. Let's just say that I drank a ton, and it culminated in, I was an isolated drinker. I wasn't a real messy. I was kind of a sloppy, happy drunk. And towards the end, I was the stay at home and be drunk person. And so like what it looked like is that I would work really, really hard all week. And then the weekends were just a giant blur of being wasted. And then I worked really, really hard in a giant blur of being wasted. So the weekends literally looked like, I remember, you know, that time of day around 6 when either the sun is going up or the sun's setting, you don't really know where you are in your day. I would turn on the TV and figure out where I was in my drinking, because it was literally drink, pass out, drink, pass out, drink, pass out, trying to shut it off around 2 a.m. Monday morning so I could get to work, right? So that's what it looked like for a really long time. You can only do that for so long. I ran a good 22 years. I didn't get sober till I was 39. I do not recommend that. I really, really feel sorry for the highly functioning alcoholics and addicts, because we can drag this out for a really, really long time, and we can tell ourselves that everything looks okay when it doesn't. And we do that by getting jobs where the hours work around our drinking, getting relationships with people that aren't going to nag us about our drinking. You know, like we set up the conditions. I think there's a piece in the big book that talks about how most people modify their behavior to reach their goals. So I'm modifying my goals to protect the behavior, right? And I did that for a very, very long time. So at the end of my drinking, it finally culminated into a lot of just crippling depression and that awful place of, I can't imagine not drinking and I can't imagine drinking. So that's when the suicide ideation came in pretty strongly. So my sobriety started checking myself involuntarily to a psych hospital and saying, this is not good, I'm going to kill myself. So Suicide Watch is where my sobriety started. The first AA meeting that I went to was at that hospital. It was the first time I said out loud, hi, my name's Anna and I'm an alcoholic. It was equal parts completely horrifying and super relieving and quite awesome. frankly. And the way everyone in that room looked at me is the way that you guys look at me all the time. And hopefully the way I look at people coming in the rooms too. I've never in my entire life experienced anywhere where I feel more safe, not judged, a part of, and connected than I do in the rooms of recovery. And that's everywhere. I love to go to meetings when I travel. There's just, you hear that preamble and you're just like, okay, I'm good, right? And that feeling has never changed for me. I've always felt that way. So my second meeting was after leaving the psych ward and had my friends get rid of all of my wine glasses and my flasks. I cried. Not gonna lie, cried when I canceled my Wine Spectator subscription. It was not pretty, but my second meeting at AA was the day I got out of detox. I did not have the luxury of going to treatment, and so I stand here before you jealous because I would have killed to have gone to treatment. Oh my gosh, I think it would have been amazing. Like, go here and sit in the circle and give us an emotion word, and here's the topic, and now go eat, and now get in the van, and we're going to go to this meeting, and now go to bed, and now get up. And I just would have killed for that. Just that checkout, right? Of being able to have someone else manage all that stuff and really be able to just focus on myself. I would have loved that, which is probably why I worked in treatment for so many years, because I'm always jealous of the people I work with. It's amazing, but it just wasn't my story, right? And so I got sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I went back to work after 4 days of detox. And that was it. AA did it all for me. My first home group had meetings at 8:30, 10, noon, 1:30, 3:45, 5:45, 7, and 8:30. And then if I wasn't at work, that's where I was. And I was terrified to be anywhere else. And it stayed like that for quite some time. I got a sponsor right away. She just looked nice. And she had 6 years of sobriety at that time, which seemed like I couldn't even imagine, 30 days sober, much less 6 years ago. Now I tease her, I'm like, you only had 6 years when we met. She's still my sponsor today, which means we've been working together for 17 years, which is amazing. Not necessarily everybody's truth. Sometimes I think it's good to get a new experience. She's just really worked out for me, and she knows me better than anyone in the universe. And so when we have to do work, we can cut right to it. I also have accountability partners. I have other people that I call for 10 steps. I've gone through the 12 steps multiple times with other people, either one-on-one or in a group. So I've always managed to kind of shake it up, and I'm not just relying on this one person to do my things, but it's really nice to have that consistency with her. And, it still works really well with both of us. So that's what it looks like now. That could change. You kind of never know. Step one, really tough for me. And keep in mind, I'm coming off of the psych ward, suicide watch. Even in the psych ward, I'm better than everybody else in there. Like hands down, when they ask me to go to the meeting, I'm like, well, I got nothing better to do. These losers, oh my God. So, there's no convincing me. I understood the powerlessness because the medical doctors told me, if you keep drinking, you're going to die. You should see your liver. You should see these numbers. Like, you cannot drink. Like, that is over for you medically. So I was able to see that. But as far as the unmanageability, I couldn't see it. Right. And I think that's the beauty of step one. I've never had a sponsee that didn't struggle with either one or the other. Never both. Right. But always one or the other. So, the unmanageability for me, I'm like, no. Career, job, pay my bills on time, relationships look relatively solid because no one knew what was going on. But it really took a long time for me to kind of figure out that unmanageable piece. And my sponsor was incredibly patient with me. And so we just kept writing list and list and list and list of like, what are the things that you do when you're drinking? Where do you show up? What do your relationships look like? Let's look at your bank account. And it took a really long time, but I did finally figure it out. The key to me finally, I don't know why this is the one that clicked in my head, but at one point I was moving apartments. This is back before we had Lyft and Uber. And I found 2 apartments at about the same rent. Both had pools, gyms, washing machine area looked good, close to work. And so I figured out what the cab ride distance was from my favorite bar to the apartment. And that's where I decided to live, right? completely unmanageable, and bragged about it to anyone who would listen. Look how organized I am. Whew, you know, that's unmanageable, right? I don't know why that one particularly clicked, because trust me, there was a million things that were unmanageable, but that one really clicked. And so once it did, I was able to really get going pretty quickly on the step work, which is good. 2 and 3 were a little bit of a struggle for me. My dad was raised very, very strict in his religion. And so he went out of his way to make sure that we did not. So I had pretty much no exposure to church or any kind of faith or anything. And so this idea that I'm supposed to find a higher power and then I'm supposed to turn my will and my life over to it didn't really make a lot of sense to me. That was really, really, really kind of hard for me. This kind of will give you the idea of what it was like for me. I have a brother. My dad and I, one day we're talking. I didn't really get along too well with my brother, and so my dad came up with this thing where on Sundays he would take a $5 bill, he'd rip it in half. He'd give one half to my brother, one half to me, and say, "Go check out a church. I don't want you home before dinner." Right? So we would have to like take our each half of the $5, go to a store somewhere, get someone to tape it together, get them to cash it, $2.50 each. And by then we were kind of used to each other. And so then we would go to church, and we went around to all the different churches. You know, that was kind of one of the things that Dad said, like every week, go to a different church or a temple and check it out. So that was what we did when we were children. I went to college and took a philosophy of religion class. And I called my dad and was like, "Hey, this philosophy class on religion is really interesting. And yeah, that was pretty cool what you had me and my brother do as far as exploring religion. You know, that was a pretty cool parenting move." And Dad just laughs and is like, "Oh, honey, your mom and I just wanted to have uninterrupted sex." And so there you have it. So you can imagine when I get to 2 and 3, what that is, you know, it's confusing for me. And my angelic, beautiful sponsor is like, "Let's get on our knees and do the 3rd step prayer." And I'm like, "What?" I mean, like, really? Like in the parking lot of our home group, in front of everybody. But, you know, I also have the desperation of a drowning man. And so, you know, I did it. And I'm proud to say that, you know, through a lot of hard work, I do have a relationship with the God of my understanding now. And I'm a regular meditator and a prayer and a gratitude lister and all the things. And so that really has worked out incredibly well for me. You know, I guess in the rooms we talk a lot about like not you as your God, or no, the doorknob can be your God. I kind of settled on a 4-way stop as my God. And frankly, it hasn't really changed too much since then, 17 years later. Think about a 4-way stop. Work with me here. It's a place in the universe. It's like really big universe. And there's this place where 4 people converge, right? And then most of the time we navigate through that intersection without hitting each other. That is respect, right? You can't tell me that's not higher power. This right here, what on earth out of the universe are we doing in this room right now, right? If someone's going to say something you need to hear, or you're going to say something that somebody else needs to hear, or maybe you just need a look or a hug or a nod, right? God is everywhere, and it doesn't have to be that complicated, right? Still, when every time I go to the movie theater, I'm like, "Oh," and my friends are like, "Oh God, she's doing that thing again." But it's true. Everyone in that movie theater decided to see that movie at that time at that theater. And we all sit in the dark and hang out together without hurting each other most of the time. You know, that's yeah, sometimes. But I mean, that's really remarkable, right? Higher power is, I think about someone and 3 days later they call me and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about you. You want to get coffee?" All right. Right. So it doesn't have to be complicated. And I think because of that, my God brings me God-hating atheists all the time. And I just go, "Okay, great." And then, you know, we do the work, and you can get around that. And because the steps are fluid and we're working them all the time, like play around with your concept of a higher power, right? It can change all the time. So I just don't get hung up on that. You know, you got some other work to do. So if you're to the point to where you admitted you're powerless and you're doing the step work with somebody, just trot on to step 4, right? Just go ahead and get there. The rest of the stuff will work itself out, right? I think the inventory gets a bad rap. It's another area where I get jealous when people are in a meeting, like, I'm starting my fourth step. I'm like, oh, I love my fourth step. I love my fifth step. No, it's not popular, but man, did I get some freedom from that. Right? Really, really good experience for me. And so don't listen to the bad rap around it. It is really, really a remarkable, remarkable step. And I think what it did for me, you know, and again, I've got this mom that died early. I've got a brother I'm not really connected to, and a very stoic father. Right. And so when I'm doing my inventory and I'm reading it to my sponsor and I look up and she's just crying. Right. It was like this moment of like, oh, some of this stuff was really hard. Some of this stuff was not good. Some of this was kind of painful. No wonder, right? No wonder this is where I am today. It was really freeing for me to be able to share that experience with someone who was willing to sit there and cry with me and say, there's some sad stuff that happened to you. Really, really powerful. And I love to do that. I love a fifth step with this sponsee for that reason, right? Talk about a really good place. That's where everybody shows up. That's where God shows up, is in that inventory. So please don't be scared about that. I'm going to skip over 6 and 7 for a minute because I have a lot to say on that. The amends process for me was really relatively simple. I was a big isolating, depressed drunk. So most of my amends looked like, I'm sorry, I made you worry. That was really kind of about it. I was a pretty quiet, miserable little thing. When I did go to the psych ward, I called my best friend to drive me there, which is, you know, not an easy thing for anyone to get the call. Hey, I'm going to kill myself unless you get me now. You know, and when I used to tell my story, it was so dramatic. I would be like, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. And I called her. It's probably like 9. But still, you know, that's a pretty awful thing to have somebody do. And, you know, she took me, and I can assure you I was not sober. So that was pretty messy. And so, you know, I don't ever want her to ever have to do that again. Super happy and grateful that she did, but I don't want her to have to take me to a psych ward again. She would do it 100%. But I think if I stay sober, the likelihood of that happening is pretty slim. Right. And it's interesting too. And for those of you that are like in treatment and you have family members that kind of get a little uneasy around you, like that's going to be a lifetime of them being uneasy, and you kind of created it. So just kind of like expect it and have some love and tolerance for it, right? I'm 17 years sober. If I call my best friend or she calls me and then I don't call her back for like 2 days, she'll call me and leave a second message and I can hear it in her voice. Hey, I called you. You call me back. 17 years sober, looking pretty good and sober, right? It's in her voice, right? That's never going to go away. And that's okay. It doesn't mean she disrespects my recovery program. It doesn't mean she loves me any less. It doesn't mean she's judging me. It means that I put her in an awful lot of fear, right? And that's not just going to magically go away. So just, you know, have some tolerance for people. That's kind of that living amends, you know what I mean, that we need to be making. And I think that's important. The other thing I'll say too, I've never made an amends and I've never heard someone give me an amends without crying. They're tough. And if you're doing it right, it can be really, really uneasy. So, and to this day, I'll be doing what I do, and my sponsor will say, you better be careful of that behavior. You're acting your way into having to make an amends. And then I'm like, what? And it will stop me because I don't like making amends. I'd rather not. I'd rather clean up my act ahead of time to avoid that, right? So that's kind of my piece on the amends. Going back to step 6 and 7, oh goodness, people in the rooms all the time are talking about, oh, there's barely anything in the big book about step 6 and 7. There's just this little tiny bit. You know, we have the 12 and 12, which gives you more information on 6 and 7. But the reality is, unless you're in a coma, you're working 6 and 7 every single day. There is no way they could put everything in the big book about 6 and 7 because that's you just living, right? So it can't be a lot in there. It's too much. It's too great, right? Well, there is supplemental literature. Drop the Rock is an amazing book that I read with all my sponsees. And then there's a follow-up to that called The Ripple Effect, which talks about step 10 in response to 6 and 7, right? Highly, highly recommend both those books. to really keep doing the work around those steps, because they are deep and they are in depth and there's a lot there, right? But what I've learned is my defects and shortcomings aren't going away. They were very purposely given to me. And then I've got some choices about what I want to do with them, right? And we've all heard our greatest defects become our greatest assets later once we figure out how to manage them. So there's really nothing wrong with saying, oh, here's where I could show up, and then maybe I'm going to slow down and show up a little bit differently, right? So someone described it to me as the defects and shortcomings are like a speed bump. And when we're not doing well, when we're sick, we see the speed bump and speed up and bottom our car out over it, right? So that's what it looks like when we're not managing it. Managing it is we see the speed bump, we recognize it, we slow down, and we kind of gently just go over the speed bump, right? Super good days is when you see the speed bump and you go, not today, and you cut over to a different road that doesn't even have the speed bump, right? Super, super helpful to me to think about it like that. And there's days that they pop up and I do not manage them well, but I'm doing the best I can. And some days they can get the better of me, but we all have them. They were all given to us to figure out what to do with them to be of service to other people. So I think sometimes just struggling with that and talking about it, I think is really, really, really helpful. Same with 10 and 11. Step 10 is basically just, we're going to take a look at the defects and shortcomings every day, right? I'm a big fan of 10 steps, right? Look for this stuff to crop up, recognize it, ask God to remove it, make an amends if I need to, and then turn my thoughts to being of service to somebody else. Huge fan of 10 steps. They're really, really helpful. The only reason I know to do a 10 step though is because I'm doing a nightly inventory, right? I'm doing the step 11 prayer meditation. I'm putting pen to paper every single night. Well, 6 out of 7 nights probably. I'm doing a nightly, and then I can watch it crop up, right? Because I'll see the same situation or the same person pop up 2-3 days. It's like, oh, this is interesting, right? And then I'm going to put some 10-step stuff in place with it. And then if it still doesn't go away, then I'm going to put pen to paper and I'm going to do a full 4th step and 5th step on it, right? And then usually that'll help it go away. But I think daily maintenance and staying on top of this stuff is really important. I mean, I don't know how much disease model stuff you guys do, but your main disease centers in your midbrain and it wants to kill you. And so your job is to stay on top of it, right? When my father was going through cancer treatment, I was in sobriety, so it was a whole different ballgame from my mother. And I did a lot of 10 steps, I did a lot of inventory, I did a lot of nightlies walking through that process. And it really, really saved me in a really big way. Like I said, he didn't do it as graciously as my mother did, but I had all of you guys, right? So I would be having a bad day at the hospital and I'd call one of you guys and, blah, 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 blah. And then I'd get yeah, but what a blessing that you get to be there. And, not wanted to hear that a lot of days. Like, no, I want to sit in victim mode over this, right? That comes a blessing. But they were right. In the same way that I was there for my mother and sat with her when she passed away, I was in the room with my father when he passed away. And I had full clarity, and I'd been sober for a while, and he was super proud of that, right? Overly proud of that. I would go to the grocery store in my hometown, and people would be like, "Oh, I hear you do the AA." It's like, Dad, no. But, he was really, really proud of it. And still now when I go home, I left a girlfriend of multiple years behind that I still go visit. And she'd be like, "You're going to go to your little meetings?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm going to go to my meetings." But she's so cute. It's a really small town. And she likes to circle. They have the list of meetings in their little tiny paper. She'll circle it, put it on the bed for me, which is really, really great because she's also a Southern woman. I'm sure it's horribly impolite for me to be an alcoholic in her circle too, but she tolerates it. So one of the things that I learned was that when I wake up every morning, I'm just an alcoholic, right? That was bad news. I remember that part of the big book about we can't rest on the laurels of yesterday. We only get a daily reprieve. I remember being really annoyed by that. But I was good 2 days. So I'm going to do something over here not so good. Doesn't work that way, right? Now it's really, and it's nice, and it's a lot more freeing that all I have to worry about is today. So when I wake up in the morning, I'm an alcoholic. I can say from years of really good practice, I do not walk out my front door without saying I'm going to be in recovery today, right? In some form or another. Some days it's really good, and there's some prayer and meditation and some journaling and stuff. Some days I'm just brushing my teeth. I'm gonna be in recovery today, and like that's all it's gonna be because I gotta go. But I will not leave the house without making a public acknowledgement out loud in front of my cats and God that I'm going to be sober today. And then I like to talk to God out loud all the way to my office, which is super fun. And I'll even be like, oh, hang on, God, I like this song. And then, okay, I'm back. But it's really cool and it really works. I heard someone share years ago, they were talking about having a bad day. And he said, you know, I had a bad day. I think it's because I left God in the driveway. And that just resonated with me so much that literally in the morning, I'm like, come on, God, let's get on. And it works, right? The other thing I will not do is I will not go to bed without saying I'm going to bed sober, right? For years, I did the page 86 nightly, you know, ask us, we're resentful, selfish, kept something that should have been shared with someone, thought of myself more than others, stream of life, blah, blah, you know it. I did that for years, but I will say that I think for me in particular, with not so great self-esteem and not really liking myself too much, that page 86 was a little bit harsh for me. And so I kind of create my own nightly prompts that look like what went well today, where did I show up today, where did I grow today, was I giving today, right? Were there any God shots? Did I love a good God shot? And so I like to shake things up a little bit and make it a little bit more positive. But even if I'm doing the standard page 86, it's like selfish, yep, resentful, kept something that should have been shared, 100%. Thinking of myself, no doubt, right? If I'm doing that 86 and it looks really bad, I'm still like, well, I'm going to bed sober. So, right, good day. Good day. Tomorrow's another day. Maybe I'll try to answer those questions a little bit differently tomorrow. But if I'm going to bed sober, that's a win. Right? I drank for 22 years every single day. I'm sure I still love it. It just doesn't work for me anymore, right? So first thing in the morning, I'm going to be in recovery. Last thing before I go to bed, I went to bed sober. Whew. And that's really worked for a long time too. You know, we kind of take for granted, I think, some of the things that we see on the walls everywhere. I don't think one day at a time registered for me till about 9 months of sobriety. And I remember staring at it one day in a meeting and being like, what? Oh, like that's amazing. Like I can do that. 24 hours, I can do that. That's amazing. That was really new information for me that didn't click. It's kind of a late bloomer with a lot of this stuff. And I will say that in early recovery, 24 hours was too long, right? I remember crying in my car in the parking lot of my home group because I wanted to drink so bad I couldn't see straight. Right. It was ugly and it was messy and I did not want to be in that room and it was really, really hard. And so some days, you know, 20 minutes at a time was about the best that I could do. I also think it's important to note that when I first came in the rooms, I had no interest in being sober, like none. I had 150% interest in never going to a psych ward again. Right? That was really, really important to me. No one was taking my shoelaces again, period. Like, that was not happening, right? And that was it. And that was my stance. And so I very, very begrudgingly got the sponsor, started working the steps, did the prayer, all the things. I had zero interest in it, but I kept being gently prodded by all of you guys and just keep going. Keep trying. And then slowly it just kind of started to feel like maybe I can do this. But for people that maybe don't have the motivation that this isn't your jam and you're not in it for the right reasons, I don't care. Right. And don't care either. Right. Trust me, it'll change over time. If you stick with it, it'll change. But I never worry about people's motivation ever. Not coming in. I'm going to worry about it later on, but not coming in. Right. So like, don't get hung up on that. Whatever got you here, you know, hopefully it'll shift. And I think it kind of does. The other thing I used to say too is, you know, well, if I get a cancer diagnosis, I'm drinking again, you know, no doubt. I don't know when that shifted. I think somewhere around year 3 or 4 being sober, when it was like, if I get cancer, I want to actually stick around for that sober. right? I want to like be gracious and show people what it's like to walk through some serious fear and have some serious faith. Still not thrilled about it, but I can't imagine anything making me want to pick up again. I just can't. Walking through my father's death was probably the closest I came. That was very, very difficult, but yeah, I can't even imagine now. Now, I will say that I'm still an alcoholic to the core, and so this brain left unsupervised is not good. And so pretty much what happens for me is if I get sick and I'm down for a couple days, that's never good. I got to be calling some people to check in with me. My sponsor and I have kind of a running agreement. If I'm going to be driving alone for more than 3 hours, I'm calling her when I get to where I'm going. Because what that'll look like for me around 3.5, 4 hours is I don't want to be an addiction therapist anymore. And AA is a bunch of crap. And I want to be a bartender again and live in Mexico. And it's a legit, like, solid, good plan in here, right? And so I'll get where I'm going. I'll call my sponsor and she'll be like, what's the plan? And I'm like, well, let me tell you. And then I tell her, and then we have to go, ha, 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 ha. And she goes, you're still an alcoholic. And I go, I'm going to go to a meeting. And that's kind of our routine, but that doesn't change for me. You know, I used to get scared when I had using thoughts, but the reality is it wasn't all bad. I had a lot of fun. I'm an alcoholic, and alcohol looks really, really good. I go by that Specs. I haven't been to Specs before. I call it 6 Lives Over Alcoholism. Never been in it because I think like, oh, what is that? But, you know, I don't need to go in there, right? I'll leave that to other people to go in there. But I set up the conditions for me to stay safe, right? So like today, I feel pretty solid. You know, tomorrow I could maybe go to a bar and see a show with some friends and be okay, because I'm gonna be riding on the high of this. But, you know, next Thursday, who knows? I might be so spiritually off the beam that the idea of going into a bar is not a good idea. And I'm probably not going to know till I get there, right? So I'm still a big fan of hang out with other people, take my own car. If I get somewhere and it's like, oh, and you know bars that stale urine, cigarette, sidling up to the bar and being like, oh, I have a Topo Chico. It just, you know, it doesn't always satisfy. You know, and so if that's happening and I'm like, oh, I'm kind of getting a little disgruntled here, I'm going to leave and I'm going to have my own car so that I can do that. And then I'm probably going to try and hit a 10 o'clock meeting, or if it's after 10, find one online, or definitely get to one the next morning, right? So I'm constantly setting up the conditions to make sure that I stay safe, you know, that I'm staying safe. Other tools that I really like to use is I use a God box, which is amazing. It's giant. I have it on my coffee table. I had it for a couple years in my back room and I never would use it, but it stares at me on the coffee table next to the remote. So if I'm going to turn on Netflix, it's like, do I need to put anything in there? So I'd usually just meditate. If something's bugging me, you know, help me with this, put it on a piece of paper, throw it in the God box. I also put happy things in there. I went on an outing recently with my sponsor and there's a group picture of us. And so I just printed out the picture and wrote thank you on the back of it and threw it in there. Lots of stuff for other people in my God box. But where it helps me as a tool is if I'm in fear around something or unease or ruminating, or I can't let something go, I will write it out, meditate, pray on it, throw it in the God box. It's going to pop up a day or two later and I'm going to start to fret about it again. But because I was raised by a polite Southern woman, if I have given it to God, if I take it back, that's horribly impolite, right? That's basically saying, hey, God, I have confidence in you and faith in you, and I'm going to give you this thing that I'm scared about. And then 2 days later, I'm like, you know what? Take that back because I don't trust you anymore, right? It's complete loss of step 3 right there. And I don't like to do that, right? So the God box is a really just good kind of accountability spot for me. Another accountability, big time, going into step 12 is sponsorship, right? We have, my lineage right now, we have a group chat and we all write out our nightlies and we screenshot it and put it in a group text. Right. It said earlier, I'm doing my nightlies probably 6 times a week. Ask me how many times I'd be doing that if I didn't have a group chat. Like I wouldn't be doing it. right? But I'm accountable, right? I'm accountable to other women to say, hey, I'm going to choose to be in recovery today. So I'm going to take the time and actually think about what my day looked like and how I want to think about tomorrow, right? So it keeps me sober. In the morning, if I don't set my intention and say I'm making a decision to be in recovery, if I get too busy and too important, unfortunately, my rule to myself is I have to pick up the phone and I have to call 6 women and say, hey, I'm not going to do it today. So see you later, right? By the time I call 6 people and say, hey, I'm refusing to get in recovery today. Have a good day. You know, I might as well just do it, right? So I need those accountability checkpoints because left to my own devices, not so worried about it, right? I definitely have a home group. I think that's really, really important for me. I need to go to a place where when I walk in the door, you can look at my face and you can tell if I had a good day or not, or if I need a hug or not. You can only get that from a home group. If I'm going to miss my group for a week or two, I'm texting a few people, hey, I'm not going to be there, I'm out of town, right? But I'm going to let them know. So I have that accountability for my home group as well. And I think what's unfortunate for some people is they go to a meeting and they don't like it. And so they, oh, well, AA is not for me because I went to this meeting and it, you know, but here's what I didn't do. When I was drinking, I went to a bar and the drinks were watered down and the parking was awful and the bartender was a jerk and I didn't like the jukebox and the bathroom was dirty. I didn't say, well, guess bars and drinking isn't for me, right? I did not do that. I went to bar after bar after bar until I found the bar that did have a good jukebox and the good parking and the cute bartenders and the half price appetizers. There's my home bar, right? Right? So if you put half the energy into finding a home group as you do into figuring out where you wanted to party, you're good, right? And there's a ton of meetings out there, so shake it up. You know what I mean? You got to keep it fresh. So I've been sober a while. I don't want to get bored. Right. And I've got a very short attention span and a natural curiosity that can either work to my benefit or it can be my worst enemy. And I need to be careful about that. Right. So I started a new thing with one of my sponsees about 3 months ago, something like that. It's just called New Meeting Monday Project. And we go to a different meeting every Monday that we've never been to before. And it is totally cool. It's great. And we're going to Austin and outside surrounding areas. We've been to Kyle and Buda. We've done big studies. We've done tradition studies. We've done mixed meetings. I mean, it's been really, really, really fascinating. And it's caused me to meet a lot of people I didn't know. And it's not boring, right? My home group's great, but I kind of know who's going to sit where and what they're going to talk about, right? But New Meeting Monday, you just don't know. You know, and after doing it for over 3 months, there's one meeting that I will say I probably would not go to again. That's it. The rest of them were pretty awesome. And a few of them I'm absolutely going to go back. Right. And not all of them are AA either, by the way. Nothing wrong with checking out other communities that are doing other recovery stuff. Right. So that's been something that's been really, really fun for me. And yeah, I kind of think I'm kind of coming to a close. I did want to read something out of our Al-Anon book that I thought was really, really, oh, that's another thing. Read all the literature in the world, right? Drop the Rod, The Ripple Effect, The Big Book, The 12 and 12, Living Sober. Wellbriety is a relatively new program now that embraces Native American cultures. I just read the Gambling Anonymous book, which is really cool. Codependence Anonymous. Trust me, there's a million of them out there. They're all super interesting. And there's a lot of good information in all of them, right? So, but from our Al-Anon literature, what I love, it says in Al-Anon, we learn that if we set aside our differences, keep an open mind, and try to learn from one another, we can find a powerful force for healing. Together, we can accomplish what is nearly impossible alone. We can overcome the devastating effects of this terrible disease and learn to live again, which I think is just amazing. And then my all-time favorite, this is so cool. This is from my sponsor, July 4th, 2006. And it says, doctor's opinion, page 63, third step prayer, and it's got her name and phone number on it. And I still have it. Page 17, beginning of chapter 2 of There is a Solution, says, the tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree, and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. When I read that, I thought, man, I can do this thing, right? Coming from two beloved family members that I nurtured and took care of while they went through cancer treatment and ultimately passed. This is a really awesome disease to have, right? I do some gratitude. I make a statement I'm going to be in recovery. I celebrate every night when I go to bed sober. I hang out with other people that are sober, right? I try and be of service to them. They're of service to me. We all love each other. We don't judge each other. We feel connected to each other. And the disease can't get me, right? I'm safe. So I'm incredibly grateful. Thank you so much for having me tonight. It's been a real honor.